Hi, everybody. It's Miss Rosie, and it was so good to see some of you at Easter Sunday. You all look so pretty and you all look so handsome, and it was great to see you in church. And hope that a lot of you are going to be in church this week. Sit tight, sit back, and watch the video with your parents.
King Ahasuerus was the king of Persia. Many years earlier, when Cyrus was king, he sent some of God's people back to Judah to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Some of God's people stayed in Persia. God's people were called Jews because they were from Judah. The king of Persia chose Esther to be his queen. Esther didn't tell the king that she was a Jew. One day, Mordecai heard that Haman, an important leader who worked for the king, was planning to kill all the Jews. Mordecai was upset. He was a Jew. He didn't want all the people he loved to be killed. Mordecai and all the Jews cried. Esther didn't know what was wrong. She sent a messenger to ask Mordecai why all the Jews were upset. Mordecai told Esther about Haman's evil plan. "You have to do something," Mordecai said. "Ask the king to stop Haman. Ask him to save the Jewish people." Esther sent a message back to Mordecai. "No one can approach the king unless the king calls for that person first," Esther said. "The punishment is death. Unless the king holds out his scepter, then you may live." "You're a Jew," Mordecai said. "If you don't stop Haman, he will kill you too. Maybe this is why you are the queen. Maybe God put Esther in the palace to save her people." Esther asked Mordecai and the Jews to fast for 3 days. Then Esther would go to the king, even if it meant she might die. On the 3rd day, Esther went to the king. He saw Esther and held out his golden scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked. "What do you want to ask me? I'll give you anything, up to half of my kingdom." Esther said, "Would you and Haman come to a feast today?" So Haman and the king went to Esther's feast. After eating, the king said, "What do you want, Queen Esther? I'll give you anything, up to half of my kingdom." "Come to my feast tomorrow," Esther said. The king agreed. The next day, Haman and the king went to Esther's feast. After eating, the king said, "What do you want, Queen Esther? I'll give you anything, up to half my kingdom." Esther spoke up. "There is a plan to kill me and my people." The king replied, "Who is responsible for this plan?" "This evil enemy, Haman," Esther said. The king was angry. He punished Haman and made a law to keep the Jewish people safe from their enemies. God was in control over Haman's evil plan to destroy the Jews. Like Haman, Satan wants to ruin God's plan and destroy believers. Satan thought he had won when Jesus died on the cross, but God raised Jesus from the dead and defeated Satan once and for all. All who believe in Jesus are rescued from sin and death.
Now, isn't that a great story? Today's Bible story comes from the book of Esther, and Esther is in the Bible. And I want to encourage all of you, when you've watched the video and when you've heard this, to go and read it together, because it's just such a terrific book. And it's about a very ordinary young woman. And God allowed Esther to become queen. Now, God knew he had a plan for Esther. He was going to use her. But guess what? Esther didn't know it. Esther became queen. And she had a relative, Mordecai. And then Mordecai was a man that loved God. And one day he heard a horrible, horrible thing that Haman, evil Haman, was going to do. Evil Haman was going to kill all of the Jews. And guess what? Esther was a Jew. Mordecai was a Jew. So Mordecai said to Esther, Esther, you have got to tell the king. Now Esther said, but I can only go to the king if he calls me. And he hasn't called me. No, he's not calling on the cell phone. Call means he hasn't summoned me to come into his presence. And he hasn't summoned me to come into his presence in almost 30 days. And Mordecai said to Esther, Esther, who knows but that God put you in this place at this time so that he could use you to save the Jews? Esther thought and said, okay, please go and let all of the Jews pray, and I will go to the king. And if I perish, I perish. But she knew what she had to do. They prayed, and after several days, Esther went to the king. Now the king could either say to Esther, I don't want to see you, goodbye, you're dead. Or he can extend his royal scepter and say, come, Queen Esther. What do you think the king did? You're right. You are so smart. The king extended the scepter to Esther and said, come, queen, what is it that you need? And so she was able to tell the king this evil plot that Haman had against the Jews. And because Esther had the courage to do what she needed to do, the Jews were saved. Now, we are saved. We are saved because God has given us Jesus to die for our sins and save us. And who knows that we, normal people, just like Esther, who knows where God has put each of us, maybe for just a specific purpose in telling somebody about Jesus. So many of you guys are going back to school this week or then these next few weeks. And you know, who knows, maybe God put you, a simple person, a normal person, someplace so that you can tell somebody about Jesus. Wouldn't that be amazing? All right, everyone, have a wonderful week, and we'll see you in church.